Picture this. Before each dawn in a Union or Confederate camp, the air heavy with wood smoke and half-burned bacon fat, men woke to the harsh reality of war. Their fate often hinged on rations as hard as bullets, coffee sometimes made from scorched acorns, and strange slabs labeled desecrated vegetables. Every bite was a battle, and ingenuity could mean the difference between another day's march or a night spent shivering on an empty stomach. 15 foods served at American Civil War camps is not just a menu, it's a window into survival, memories, and the hunger that shaped history. Some of these dishes will feel alien, even shocking. Would you have survived on them, or even dared to taste them? Hardtack, there's no getting around it. Soldiers called it tooth dullers, sheet iron crackers, and, less kindly, worm castles. Each man in blue or gray could expect a daily ration of 9, stamped by the tens of thousands in northern factories and packed into barrels for the long haul south. The crackers clacked like stones in a haversack, sometimes older than the men eating them. Hungry hands would wrap them against rifle stocks to check for weevils. If nothing wriggled out, you counted yourself lucky. Most chewed them dry, risking a chipped tooth. The smart ones soaked them in whatever was hot: bean broth, bacon grease, or coffee if they had it. Private Wilbur Fisk wrote home about skillet, hardtack softened in water, then fried in pork fat until golden. Not fancy, but it beat gnawing on cold brick. Salt pork came next, fatty, streaked with brine, and tough as saddle leather when first pulled from the barrel. The smell alone could turn a new recruit's stomach, but it was a lifeline. Soldiers soaked it overnight in a tin cup or, if they were lucky, a running stream, anything to draw out the salt. Then it went straight into the pan, spitting and popping over the fire. The grease it left behind was liquid gold, saved for frying hardtack or beans, and sometimes even rubbed into boots to keep out the damp. On a cold morning, the scent of frying pork meant hope, at least for a few minutes. Beans were the workhorse of the camp kitchen. Dried navy or pinto beans, issued by the barrel, needed hours of boiling in battered pots. When the commissary was generous, salt pork went in for flavor, along with a dash of molasses or an onion if someone had foraged one. The result was thick, hearty, and could stick to your ribs for the next march. On slow days, men swapped stories around the bubbling pot, scraping the sides for every last bite. Beans weren't just food, they were a measure of time, patience, and the cook's reputation. Down south, when wheat ran short, Johnny Cakes took over. Cornmeal, salt, water, and a slick of bacon grease, patted into rough rounds and cooked on a flat rock or skillet. Some called them hoe cakes or ash cakes, depending on what you had to cook with. The taste was simple, earthy, a little sweet, sometimes gritty, but it filled the gap when bread was a memory. Confederate boys grew up on cornmeal, and in camp, it was a taste of home, however rough. Would you have traded your morning hardtack for a fresh Johnny Cake hot off the coals? These weren't delicacies. They were survival, bite by bite. Soldiers learned quick: make do, share what you can, and never waste a crumb. In the words of Private Fisk, skillet is a dish fit for a soldier, and in camp, that was praise enough. Coffee was not just a drink in Civil War camps, it was a lifeline, a ritual, and sometimes the only thing that made a cold morning bearable. Union soldiers got used to the rich, smoky aroma drifting through camp at dawn, each man clutching his battered tin cup. They went through 36 pounds of beans per man, per year. John Billings remembered the way men would roast green beans in frying pans, crush them with rifle butts, then boil the grounds over a sputtering fire, anything to coax out one more cup. The smell alone could lift a weary spirit, but not everyone had it so easy. For the Confederates, coffee was a memory by 1862. Blockades cut off shipments, and what little made it through cost more than a month's pay. So, Southern camps turned to ingenuity. Chicory root became the go-to substitute, dug up, chopped, and roasted until it turned dark and fragrant. Some men tried acorns, sweet potatoes, or even burnt cornmeal. The results? Mixed at best. Letters home called it Lincoln coffee, half in jest, half in bitterness. One of the strangest rations to hit Union camps was the infamous desiccated vegetable brick. Soldiers called it desecrated. Imagine a foot-long slab packed with dried turnips, carrots, and beans, boiled to mush in the hope of staving off scurvy. Private complaints filled the mail. The flavor was musty, the texture like hay, and the smell could clear a tent. Some men swore it was only good for patching boots or, as one diary joked, stuffing a pillow. Rice sometimes showed up as a sweet treat when the commissary had a surplus. Boiled with sugar, and if luck held, a splash of molasses, it became a rare comfort. Soft, sticky, and just sweet enough to remind a soldier of home. Even in the worst camps, a spoonful of rice pudding could turn a meal into a memory. Would you have traded a week's ration for a real cup of coffee, or dared a taste of desecrated vegetables? In these small moments, the line between misery and morale was measured by what filled a tin cup or a battered mess pan. Greens weren't just for garnish, they were a lifeline. During the Atlanta campaign, soldiers scoured the edges of camp for anything edible: lamb's quarters, pokeweed, dandelion leaves, even wild onions. Captain Cheney once told his men, "While there is corn in Egypt or food in the Southern Confederacy, no man in Cheney's battery shall go hungry, orders or no orders." Hunger made foragers out of everyone, and a handful of boiled weeds could mean the difference between marching and falling behind. Kush was the Southern soldier's answer to stew, part resourcefulness, part comfort. Bacon went into the pan first, fried until crisp, then cold beef scraps joined the grease. Cornbread crumbs or biscuits soaked up the fat and broth, turning into a thick, savory mash. Sometimes, Kush was all that stood between a man and an empty belly. The taste, salty, smoky, and heavy on the corn. Filling, if not exactly fine dining. Skilly Glee brought a little flair to the Union mess. Hardtack, battered and worn from weeks in a haversack, got a second life. Soaked in water, then fried golden in pork fat. The outside crisped up, the inside softened, and suddenly tooth dullers tasted almost like home. Some cooks tossed in a pinch of sugar or a splash of molasses if they had it. It was the kind of camp hack that made a mess fire feel like a family kitchen. Not every meal was rationed. Some were won with quick feet and a bit of nerve. Corporal Phelan's chicken raid became camp legend. Slipping out at dusk, he and a buddy liberated 3 hens from a nearby farm, smuggling them back under their coats. When the officer caught wind, he only asked for a share of the spoils. That night, the whole mess feasted on fresh fricassee, laughter echoing between tents. For a moment, the war faded, replaced by the simple joy of a hot meal and good company. Even in the thick of war, soldiers found ways to conjure up a taste of celebration. When rations ran thin and spirits ran low, a little ingenuity and sometimes a little luck could turn the ordinary into a feast. Hardtack pudding was one such invention. Men would bash the tough biscuits into crumbs, stir them with flour, roll out a rough dough, and fill it with stewed dried apples or raisins if a care package from home had arrived. Wrapped in a scrap of cloth and boiled in bubbling water, it came out soft, steaming, and just sweet enough to pass for dessert. For a few bites, camp felt almost like a family kitchen. Gingerbread carried a different kind of comfort. In makeshift hospitals, nurses and volunteers handed out thick, molasses-rich slabs to the wounded. Sometimes the first real treat a soldier had tasted in months. One nurse called it a singular food for sick men, but she knew its real power. Gingerbread softened the edge of pain and reminded boys in blue and gray of home kitchens and holidays left behind. Letters home often mentioned the comfort it brought, the way it broke up the monotony of beans and salt pork. But no camp treat matched the scale or the heart of Thanksgiving 1864. In just 3 weeks, New Yorkers raised over $250,000 and shipped more than 400,000 boxes packed with turkey, chicken pies, cakes, pickles, and apples to the front. Delmonico's roasted birds by the thousand. Supply trains and steamers carried the feast from City Point to the Army of the Potomac and beyond. General Hayes at first grumbled that the turkeys delayed winter coats, but later wrote, "Everyone is jolly and happy." For a single day, the war paused, and every soldier who opened a box tasted proof that he was remembered. Would you have traded your last piece of hardtack for a slice of gingerbread or a drumstick sent from home? Across 4 years of war, Union soldiers received an average of 9 hardtack crackers a day, while Confederate troops often turned to wild greens and creative substitutes just to fill their camp kettles. Diaries and letters, from the complaints about desecrated vegetables to the joy over a rare gingerbread treat, reveal how food shaped morale, health, and even camaraderie. Yet, despite thousands of documented ration lists, we still do not know every recipe or improvisation born around smoky campfires. The true taste and texture of Civil War fare survives through these surviving accounts and preserved artifacts, but many details, like the full variety of foraged meals or the exact spices used, remain out of reach. What is clear is that necessity drove invention, and shared hardship fostered a lasting bond among soldiers. Today, their food stories remind us that behind every battle, survival depended as much on the contents of a tin cup as on courage. Which of these dishes would you have tried? If this glimpse into forgotten food history surprised you, consider subscribing for more.